everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. Today's tutorial is actually our first tutorial for Spencer Ogg sewing patterns. Diane from Spencer Ogg reached out to me and she actually sent me a copy of the Worsley Wallet. And it is such a cute pattern. Alright, so let's talk about the wallet. This is the Worsley Wallet and this is such a classic wallet. It's very simple, but super sleek. So you can see on the front, we have this beautiful strap holder, which I will be showing you how to do in the tutorial today. We have this beautiful strap that goes from the back all the way over the flap. You pull it out. It's nice and firm. The interfacing we're using today keeps it so that you don't have any of your corners rolling up or anything like that. You open it up, and then you see it opens just like this very traditional. Card slots on one side, bill folds for both sides, coin pocket in the middle. We have these beautiful simple gussets on the side. There are no thick seams. And traditionally when we do wallet patterns, we have some pretty thick seams. Your needle is probably not going to break. Unless it is a very old needle, this wallet is not going to break your needle. This is a great pattern for those of you who want to try your first wallet. I do highly recommend this. It is simple, it doesn't require a lot of material, it's not challenging to sew together. It does have quite a few steps, but to be completely honest, all wallet patterns do. Wallets just take a little bit more time because they're very precise, but this is such a great pattern. So like I said, I was gifted the pattern by Diane. Thank you so much, Diane, for reaching out to me and gifting me that pattern. The one thing I wanted to note before we got started was you can see we use this beautiful strap holder right here. This is hardware from Emmeline Bags, and I will definitely have a link for it down in the description below. However, I realize that not everybody has these on hand. I didn't. I actually had to order these. So I wanted to let you know that if you are interested in making this wallet, but you don't have this on hand and you don't feel like waiting for it to come in, Diane's Facebook group actually has 5 different alterations to this pattern specifically for this strap holder. So if you go to her Facebook group, which I will have a link for down in the description of this video, you can check out some PDFs there where she walks you through 5 different ways to replace this strap keeper. I mean, everything from using vinyl or cotton to a magnetic clasp to removing the strap piece altogether and changing the flap. She has a lot of options. So if you are someone who just really wants to make this pattern as soon as you see this video, you don't have to wait for this hardware to come in. To be completely honest, I love this. This beautiful piece of hardware. I mean, I really feel like it makes the wallet. So if I wanted to make a wallet right away, I would check out her Facebook group, make one of the alternative versions with whatever I have on hand, but I would still order some of these strap holders because there is just no better look, right? This is just it's such a simple design, but with that piece of hardware and this pop of color on the strap, it makes it so classy, right? So if you aren't already subscribed to the channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shout outs, anything you want to say, leave them down in the comment section down below. Don't forget that the very first comment in the comment section down below will be from me, and it will have timestamps for every single step of this tutorial. Like I said, this is a wallet, so it has quite a few steps. So if there's just one part of the pattern you're working on, go down to the comment section, find that step, click the number next to it, and it will take you straight there in the video. All right, let's get started. So let's go over the materials. For the exterior, you're gonna need about a fat quarter of quilt cotton. For the lining, I suggest about a ½ yard of quilt cotton. And for my strap, I really like to use a non-sticky vinyl just to kind of give it a little pop and sturdiness. If you're using a thicker fabric like vinyl or cork, you don't need to use the stiff interfacing inside of the strap, which we'll talk about in a minute. So this is a great way to kind of reduce the amount of interfacing you need to use. So all of my interfacing today is from gotinterfacing.com. I'll have a link for their website down below. I'm going to be using Woven Fuse, which is just like a Pellon SF101, just a lightweight woven interfacing. And then to keep the structure of the wallet really firm, I'm using Decoville Heavy. From the Woven Fuse, you're going to need about a ½ yard. And from the Decoville, I suggest about a fat quarter. In addition to the fabric, you're going to need a 7-inch or longer all-purpose zipper. You're going to need a 1-inch wide strap holder. Like I said, I get mine from Emmeline Bags, and I'll have a link for that down in the description below. Don't forget that there are alternative options to this hardware right here. Just make sure you check out the Facebook group for Spencer Ogg, and you'll find 5 different other options for this. In addition to that, I'm going to be using this Gutermann polyester thread today. I do suggest you use it in your top thread and also in your bobbin. So here's the other stuff. I'm going to be using this leather double-sided tape, and I'll have a link for this down in the description. I'll be using Microtex 8012 needles today. If you're using the strap holder, you're going to need a small screwdriver to install that. And for marking my fabric, I have this Fons & Porter white chalk pencil and an air erasing sew line marker. So let's go through each of the pattern pieces. When printing off the pattern, make sure you print it at 100% or actual size. On the printout, there is a test square for you to measure and confirm it printed at the right size. So from the A pattern piece, you're going to need to cut 1 outer fabric and 1 lining fabric. This is going to be the outside of your wallet. The B pattern piece is for the pocket on the inside of the wallet. You're going to need to cut 2 lining cuts from this. Our C pattern piece is for the gussets. You can use the lining or the outer fabric or a totally different fabric if you'd like. This is just going to be the side of the wallet that's only seen when it's open. I'm going to be using my exterior fabric for this. You'll need 4 of these cuts. From the D pattern piece, you're going to need to cut 1 lining piece. For your Decoville Heavy, she does provide pattern piece E. You'll notice that you will have to tape these 2 together. And this is more of a T-shaped. It's not a perfect rectangle. Pattern piece F is your strap. You can use vinyl or quilt cotton for this. Pattern piece G is a stabilizer for your strap. Now you only really need this if you're going to be using quilt cotton on pattern piece F. Since I'm using vinyl, I actually don't need to add stabilizer for this piece. And then pattern piece H is your zip tab for your pocket. You're going to need 1 cut of lining for that. In addition to the fabric cuts, you're going to have 3 extra cuts of lightweight interfacing. For panel A, you're going to have interfacing for lining cut J. For your lining card slot panel D, you're going to have interface cut K. And for your inside zip pockets cut B, you're going to have 1 cut of interfacing, which is cut L. The measurements for the interfacing are all located in the pattern. So let's first attach our lightweight interfacing. Take the lining panel from pattern piece A and the interfacing that is interfacing cut J. What we're going to do is just center our interfacing on the back of the lining panel. So take your lining panel and lay it right side down. Grab your interfacing and lay it glue side down, so rough side down. You'll notice that it's not the same size. Just center it as best you can. You really don't need to measure this, just center it by eyeballing it. And grab your iron and fuse it in place. We're going to do the same thing for panel D. So this is just your lining panel. Once again, laying it right side down. And take your interfacing, rough side down, and center it to the best of your ability. And then just iron on. I find with woven fuse, I can iron on the back of it just fine. You'll notice a lot of interfacing likes to be ironed from the fabric side, but woven fuse will fuse very well if you just iron it from the back of the woven fuse. And for your L interfacing, you're going to attach that to just 1 of your lining pieces from pattern B. Again, on the back side, centered. All right, so now let's discuss fusing on our body interfacing, which is that firm stabilizer. For us, we're using Decoville Heavy. This is going to be attached to the back of your exterior panel A. So if you're using a directional print like I am, she does suggest in the pattern, lay your print so that it is upside down. So our fabric is wrong side down, and our print has the top on the bottom and the bottom on the top. It's upside down. We want the flap part, the wider part, to be on the bottom of our print, because whenever we fold our wallet closed, we want our print to be right side up, just like this. You see? So just make sure you have your directional print upside down, and we fuse this on with the wider part of the interfacing up top. For this one, you do want to be a little bit more picky about how this all lines up. In the pattern, she shows you that the top and the sides of the flap portion, the wider portion, need to be 3/8 of an inch from each side. We're not so worried about the bottom, but we are concerned about the top and the sides. There we go. So since we have to kind of keep this in place, I'm not going to turn this over just yet. To press, I'm going to use a scrap piece of fabric, just any fabric really, that's quilt cotton, and I'm going to lay that over the back of the wrong side of my Decoville, and I'm going to iron on top of that. If you have a steam iron, now's the time to fill her up and use the steam. This type of interfacing adheres really well with steam. You don't need steam, it just might take a little bit longer. There you go. Once you have the top fused down well enough, go ahead and move your scrap piece of fabric down and fuse the rest of it. Right now, I'm just trying to get that glue to melt and this to stay in place, and then I'll flip over the unit and give it a good press from the right side to make sure it doesn't move around on us. All right, we can go ahead and flip this over and continue fusing from the right side. And by fusing from the back and the front, you really just make sure that it's not going to peel off at any point. I usually do this with my woven interfacing as well. I'll fuse it from the back and then I'll cut out the pieces and then I'll fuse it from the front. All right, you can go ahead and put this piece to the side. Let's build the strap. Grab your strap piece, and like I said, I'm using vinyl, so I'm not going to be attaching any interfacing here. If you are using cotton woven, make sure you attach your interfacing per the instructions in the pattern. She just lets you know how far it needs to be from each edge, and then continue on in the same manner that I'm doing. So what we want to do is fold up both of our long edges to meet in the middle. Now you can measure this. You can figure out the width of the strap and then divide that by 2 to make it exact, or you can just eyeball it. This part is not going to be seen in the end, so it doesn't have to be perfect. So I just kind of eyeball it and just make my strap meet up in the middle. Just do this along the entire length of your strap. Okay, once you have this pinned in place, pick one end. You only have to do this for one end, and fold down that raw edge while it's folded with the long sides together. Fold it down about 3/8 of an inch. So you should have something like this now, with one edge folded down towards your raw edges that are meeting in the middle. Next, we're going to take our raw edge that's not folded down, and we're actually going to fold it with the open edges together. So we're going to have a nice clean outer edge now, just like this, and fold it just to meet that hem that you made with that 3/8 of an inch, and then include both of these folds in the clips, just like this. And I just go down and adjust my clips. I use a lot of clips when I'm working with vinyl like this because I can't press it, and I don't want to use the tape right now. If you have the wash away double-sided tape, you could definitely use that here to help hold everything in place. When you get down to this bottom corner, just adjust to make sure it's nice and neat. So this is what you should have. You have one side that's just perfectly smooth, no seams at all. Another side that just has that very small seam where you have that 3/8 of an inch hem. This folded side over here that's on the opposite side of that hem is going to be the edge of your strap that you see and what slides in and out of your strap holder. So now fold this so that you have the raw edge by your hem face down. She's going to give you the measurement of where to mark this in the pattern. Just use a small ruler and measure from the strap end, which is, like I said, is that folded edge that's on the opposite edge of the hem. When doing this, I suggest using some sort of a chalk marker just because that's very easy to erase, and this will be seen in the end. And all you have to do is just measure yourself a line right here. I know I have a lot of clips, so it's kind of hard to draw there, but I have an idea of where my line's supposed to be right there. Also, you'll notice in the pattern that she gives a lot of instructions in centimeters. She also gives the measurements in inches. Just make sure you don't confuse those two because sometimes it's easy to do. Okay, so now we're going to top stitch the end of the strap. So remember, the end of the strap is the folded edge that's far away from that 3/8 of an inch hem. We're going to top stitch at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance around the bottom edge, up the sides, till we get to that marked line, go across the marked line all the way around. Just make a nice rectangle here. So this is what you should have if you're using vinyl like I am. You probably still have your clips on. So we have the raw edge that has no top stitching on it, and our new strap that has the top stitching on the bottom edge. Now grab your main panel and lay your main panel so that the wider edge of the interfacing is down. So it's interfacing side down and the wider edge is on the bottom, just like this. We're going to attach our strap to that wider edge. So first what you can do is just find the midpoint. You can just gently fold that bottom edge in half. Grab a marker and just mark that crease right there so that you have the midpoint. And we're going to attach our strip directly over the midpoint. And just to help you, you can use that mark on the bottom to help you mark the middle of your panel. If you do this, use a chalk pencil just in case you mark too far, just like that. Now we want to attach our strap with the folded edge that has the top stitching going off the bottom of our panel just over 1 inch. She has the exact measurement in the pattern, so just check that out. And we want this to be lined up with that center mark. So to attach this, I'm actually going to use my double-sided leather tape. I like this leather tape because it is extremely sticky. It'll hold pretty much anything in place, but it can be very difficult to sew over. So we're going to make sure we don't sew over this. You want a small cut of this, just about 1.5 inches, and we're going to apply this to the center of the back of our strap where we have that little folded over hem. I'm going to include that hem with my tape just a little bit, just like that. You see how I have it centered on there? So now when I attach this, I won't actually sew over this sticky tape, but it will keep it in place really well. So we can go ahead and remove the clips, and then you're going to lay your strap so that the folded top stitch edge is overhanging just a little over 1 inch. She gives you the exact measurement in the pattern. And make sure that it's centered over your chalked midpoint line. Once you have that in place, go ahead and remove the paper from your tape and lay that down just like that. And if you had any of your edges come out a little bit, you can go ahead and just add a couple clips on those sides again. I know it seems kind of fussy, but it does actually work really, really well. Now we're going to go ahead and top stitch this taped down piece at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along all of the edges that don't have top stitching, and also make sure you go over that top stitching mark that you already went over that you marked with your chalk pencil. So now we're just making a small rectangle over the rest of the strap that doesn't have top stitching. So this should be what your exterior panel looks like now with your strap attached. If you use chalk, you can go ahead and just wipe that off. You can go ahead and set this to the side now. Now we're going to make the credit card pockets. So this is panel D. You'll notice on your template, you have these lines, D, C, B, and A. These are going to be your fold lines. So you're going to want to lay this right side up. And what I do is I just line up the panel piece with the edge of the panel and mark where these lines are. Just make sure you mark where it's going to be in the seam allowance. So just right along the edge, I'm going to mark at D, at C, at B, and at A. I'm going to do that on both sides. All right, once you have those marked, you can move your panel piece to the side. And what we're going to do, we're going to grab our iron. So starting with our bottom line, which is A, I'm going to pinch right on those marks, just like this. And then I'm going to fold it wrong sides together. So we have just this small fold over, and then I'm going to press this fold. Okay, so now pull it back up so that you have the full panel right side up. And so now we're going to take that pinched edge, and where we have mark B, which is just below our mark C, we're going to fold that edge up to meet those marks. just like this. Try to make sure your sides are not all wonky. If you notice that it's kind of twisted like this, then you didn't measure it right. So check it again with your pattern piece. Just make sure it meets those marks and the edges are nice and straight, and then press this down. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with C and D. So C is the next mountain we want to make. So just pinch those so that you pinch the fabric wrong sides together. Just like this. And then we can just fold along this to make it easier to bring up to the line D. There we go. Fold your whole unit right side up. So you should see you have your first pocket already ready to go. Now take that new folded edge and line that up with your D marks. And again, make sure the edges are straight. You don't have any twisting anywhere. And then just press this down. So now your unit should look just like this with these two folded pockets. What we want to do now is just fold down this top raw edge. So you can just flip it so that it's right side down. Remember, we're working with the top. And we want to fold it down 3/8 of an inch. To help you be as precise as possible, you can actually just mark on the wrong side of your fabric at the top 3/4 of an inch, line down just like this. And then fold down that raw edge to meet that marked line. And then just press as you go. There we go. So when we turn this right side out, we should have these nice two folded pockets and then a folded edge at the very top, very clean. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along all three of these pressed edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. One of the things that I love when pattern designers do, and very few do this, but Diane does, and I just love it. She reminds you to attach your logo. I am somebody who notoriously forgets to put logos on my bags. So when the pattern says, hey, if you have a logo, now's the time to add it, I appreciate that so much. So she suggests adding it to the bottom right corner. Don't add it too far down because this is all going to get stitched up. So I like to kind of just put it about right there. And you can tape this down or pin this down. I just kind of eyeball it and throw it on there. But I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch this logo down, but making sure I only go through one layer of lining fabric. I don't want to go through the pockets. Okay, so now you should have your credit card slots all ready to go. Grab your A lining unit, and you're going to take your credit card pockets and lay them right side down, and we're going to clip them in place along the edges, a distance from the top to the bottom. Now, she gives you this measurement in the pattern, so you're going to have to check the pattern, but she tells you from the top down to the bottom of your credit card slots how far that should be. So I like to just draw a chalk line where that is and then line up the bottom raw edge of my card slots. Remember, they're right sides down, wrong sides up, along that line, and make sure that the edges are lined up with the edges of the lining, and it should all be nice and neat. Once you have it in place, you can just clip or pin along the edges of the card slots to hold it together. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're only going to sew along this raw edge at 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once you have this stitched down, go ahead and remove your clips. And we're going to fold our card slots up just like this. And make sure you line up the edges really well. And then I'm just going to clip them down just to hold it in place while I work on the next couple steps. Now grab your iron and let's just press along that stitched on edge. And now we can top stitch this edge down on the pocket panel at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So here's where we're at. We have the card slots attached to the lining panel. We have it top stitched down on the bottom. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that this top slot isn't too deep for our credit cards. So what we want to do is fold down these bottom pockets completely out of the way. And you can just clip them along the sides like this so we have it nice and open. And we only have this folded edge at the top. And what we're going to do is sew a line that is 2 inches down from this top folded edge on this pocket through the pocket and the lining. What that does is it allows this top pocket right here to not be so deep so that your credit cards will actually be viewable. So I'm just going to grab a ruler and line up my 2-inch mark with that folded edge and draw a line just like this. Now the thing is you want to keep everything in place really well. So if you want to check yourself real quick, line it all up again, just the way you want it to be in the end, like this. Pin down that first top edge or clip it, just like that. Now take the bottom 2 pockets and pull those out of the way. Clip those down so that they don't bother you when you're at the sewing machine. Now, everything should be where it needs to be for our finished product. We're going to go to the sewing machine and we're just going to sew along this marked line. All right, once we have that stitched down, you can go ahead and release those 2 bottom pockets and push them back up. You can see we have a lot of threads on the side. We'll clean those up in just a minute. Okay, so now we want to draw a line down the center for our credit card slots. You can go ahead and just measure the width of your panel. Divide that in half and mark a line that is half of that from the edge. I'm going to use this chalk pencil. You want something that is going to erase very easily. So now what we're going to do is go to the sewing machine and we're going to baste the sides down at about a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and we're going to sew along this center marked line. When we're sewing along this, I do like to go from the bottom up to the top because sometimes your presser foot will push down these panels and you'll end up with a wrinkle on the bottom. So if you start at the bottom, make your way to the top, you won't have that happen. Also make sure you backstitch really well, especially at the top right here because this is going to be pulled on quite frequently. So this should be your card slot pocket. Before we move on, I like to just trim down some of these edges, especially since we don't interface the edge of our fabric. You'll notice that you'll often have the fabric fraying. If you're using quilt cotton, when we use interfacing that goes all the way to the edge, that prevents this from happening. But by not having interfacing on the edge, we're going to reduce the bulk significantly for this wallet. You can go ahead and put this to the side. Now let's work on the center zip pocket. Grab your 2 B lining pieces. Grab the lining piece that does not have the interfacing. So this one right here. And we are going to cut off a 1/4 inch. One thing to note here is these are actually not squares. I know they look like squares, but they're not. If you take one of your lining pieces and line it up with the other, you'll notice that when you do it one way, they line up perfectly. But if you do it the other way, one is just a little bit wider. So the shorter edge is the top. What we want to do is from our lining panel that does not have the interfacing, we want to cut a 1/4 inch off the bottom. So before you do that, just make sure you line this up and make sure you have the top ready to go. You could even mark a little T in the seam allowance for it, just to make sure you don't forget this. We're cutting a 1/4 inch off of this edge, not off of this edge. So as you can see, I marked the top on both of my lining panels, and so when I line them up perfectly, one is a 1/4 inch shorter than the other. All right, you can put these to the side while we prepare the zipper. So take your zipper tab, and what we're going to do is we're going to fold down wrong sides together a 1/4 inch from one edge. Take your iron and just press that down. Now grab your zipper, and we're going to apply this zipper tab, wrong side against the right side, over the zipper on the end of the closed portion. So if you have a zipper like I do, you might have this little metal stop. We want to attach this just before that. It doesn't have to be right against it. It can be just like a 1/4 inch before you get to it. And then just clip this in place. We don't want it to be too close where we accidentally sew over it. So, like I said, a 1/4 inch, 3/8 inch away from that zipper stop. So now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew along my folded edge of my zipper tab at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now we're going to trim down these edges on the sides of the zipper. Go ahead and flip this over, grab your scissors, and just trim down the fabric right along the edge of the zipper. There we go. Do this on both sides. I find it's helpful to keep the zipper untrimmed while you do this. And then what I do, just to make sure I don't accidentally sew over this metal stop at any point, is I trim down this zipper to remove the metal stopper. And we have just a little bit left over underneath the zipper tab. So now she gives you the distance in the pattern, but you're going to measure from the edge of this zipper tab all the way over on your zipper and then mark in the seam. So I'm just going to line up my ruler and I'm just going to give a little mark on one side and then again on the top, mark on the other side, just like this. Now, you could definitely grab another zipper tab and add that zipper tab right here. Just like we did this, fold a 1/4 inch down, sew it on right at this marked line, and that way you have a nice, clean zipper right here. But we're going to stick with the pattern and we're going to fold down these edges as she suggests. I really like this look on a zipper. It's very clean. It's very simple once you kind of get the hang of it. So where we marked, we're going to pinch wrong sides together of our zipper, just like this. While you have the outer edge pinched, you'll notice the zipper starts folding up on its own and twisting. We want to just let it do that. We want it to twist at a 90-degree angle behind that fold. So you'll notice on the front, we have this nice fold with the zipper going up and all the way to the right. If you flipped it over and looked at the back, you have this nice 45-degree angle. This is what we want. Now I'm going to clip this just like that. We're going to do the same with the other side. So pinch on that mark. Again, your mark should be in the seam allowance portion of your zipper tape, so on the very outer edge. Pinch it and you see the zipper just wants to fold on its own. So just assist it, fold it back, and clip. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're just going to baste down this angle so that it doesn't come undone while we're sewing the zipper to our panels. So grab your lining pocket piece that has the inner face attached, lay it so that it is right side up with the top facing up. And what we want to do is apply our zipper to this panel. Now, she gives you measurements to make sure it comes in. What you can also do is attach this by finding the midpoints. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold my zipper tape and I'm going to line up that 90-degree angle with the edge of my zipper tab. I'm not going all the way to the end of my zipper tab. I'm going to that folded edge, just like that. That's what I want to find the middle of. Do the same on the other side. Folded edge goes up to meet the fold of our zip tab and mark that midpoint. Grab your lining panel and fold that right sides together along your top edge and find the midpoint there. Again, we're always only marking in the seam allowance. So none of these marks are going to be seen in the end. So now take your zipper and lay it right side down and line up your midpoint marks just like that and clip in place. So you should notice your folded edge doesn't reach the outer edge and your zip tab hangs over the other side of your zip pocket. Now grab your other zip pocket lining piece and we're going to, with the top up, lay it right side down and just line it up perfectly with your other panel and include it in your clips. So you should see it should line up just like this. The sides should be perfectly lined up. You have this other panel that's a little bit shorter than the bottom panel and the zipper is sandwiched in between them. We're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along our zipper at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure you use a zipper foot when doing this. All right, once you have that sewn on, you can go ahead and trim down that zipper hanging out. And now we're going to take our lining pieces and fold them wrong sides together away from the zipper and just press along that seam by the zipper. Now, we can go ahead and top stitch along this seam. However, we won't be top stitching along the other. So if you don't like the look of just one side being top stitched and not the other, just leave this. I'm going to top stitch this, but it is optional. Okay, here we go. Now we're just going to repeat this process to attach our panels to the other side. So what you can do is just take one of your lining panels, I'm taking the one with the interfacing, and fold it right sides together up to meet that zipper. And just make sure you're matching up the edges really well as the top edge, and clip in place. And I'll even clip along the sides sometimes just to make sure it's all nice and neat. Okay, and then you just flip it over so that you have the zipper wrong side up now, and you have that extra lining panel that's all loosey-goosey. And just fold that up to meet the other lining panel with the zipper in between them. There you go. So you should have both of them wrong sides facing out, the zipper in between. Once again, we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew along this pinned edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, after you have that attached, you can go ahead and trim down any excess you have on your zipper. And we can just fold this whole thing right side out. Now let's go ahead and press along that zipper edge that we just sewed down. So now we can close the zipper and then give the whole pocket a nice flat press. So this should be where you're at. You can go ahead and trim down that zipper tab. And it's nice and pressed and flat. We're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to baste along these raw edges at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have these basted down, you can just kind of clean up all of these threads by trimming it down just a tiny bit. Okay, you can go ahead and put this pocket to the side. So now let's grab the exterior main panel and the lining panel with the pockets. Lay them just like this. So the exterior main has the strap pointing straight up and the lining has the pockets facing straight up. Before we sew these together, we're going to press down the bottom edges of each panel 3/8 of an inch. So you can go ahead and flip these over. And just like we've done before, we can mark a line that is 3/4 of an inch along the bottom panel on each one of these. And then all you have to do is fold up that raw edge to meet that marked line and press. Do the same on the exterior panel as well. So before we attach these, you're going to want to make sure you keep this strap out of the way. You can tape it back if you have strong enough tape. I don't, so I'm just going to push it out of the way and make sure it doesn't get caught in my seam as I'm stitching. So now we're going to lay our lining panel and our exterior panel right sides together with the tops together and those pressed seams on the bottom together just like that. So those pressed seams are going to help remind you of where the bottom is. And all we have to do is clip along these two rectangles all the way around. So now we're going to go around and stitch along each edge except that folded bottom edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch really well around this bottom edge because we will be turning this and this will need to be a stronger stitch. Okay, before we turn this out, let's just clip down these corners right here. And now turn your wallet out through that opening. It's a nice big opening, but that stabilizer wants to stay flat. You have to crinkle it. Don't worry, once we press it, it'll go back to being very smooth and flat again. And then just poke out those corners. You should poke out pretty easily because of that stabilizer. Just make sure your bottom edges are still folded down. Now let's just press this out really nice. So now we want to top stitch over the flap. So the flap is where we have our strap. You're going to make sure you hold your strap out of the way. You're going to start and stop your top stitching right at the tops of your credit card slot. Now you can do this from the top and just eyeball where it starts and stops, or you can flip it so that it's lining side up and top stitch. If you have the same colored bobbin thread as top stitching thread, this should be fine. But we want to top stitch along the flap just like that at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so this should be where you're at. You have the top stitching around the flap, the lining and the exterior are attached. Now we're going to add our strap keeper, which is this piece of hardware right here. So what you're going to do is you're going to fold down everything into the finished position. I like to fold it right where the strap kind of stays right up like that, so that when it goes down, it'll be just like that. And then fold your bottom so that it comes up to meet that crease from the top flap. So you can see when it goes together like this, it'll end up like that. So this would be my wallet in the end. Now, if you want this to be a little bit looser, you can adjust it however you want. So what we're going to do now is figure out where exactly we want to put our strap keeper. I'm going to clip the sides closed so I don't have to worry about this moving too much. And I'm going to clip my strap down. You want your strap keeper to come down about 1/4 inch below the folded edge of your flap, and you can just eyeball this. So what I'm going to do is take the plate that comes with the strap keeper and line it up underneath my flap and just kind of adjust it so that it's straight and 1/4 inch from the flap, holding it in place. I'm going to use a marker and just draw dots in those holes for the strap keeper holder. So when I install this, it should install right over those holes and end up looking just like that with that metal plate inside the wallet. So there are lots of different ways to poke a hole here. Whenever you're doing this, you don't want to go through the lining. You only want to go through the exterior panel and the interfacing. You can use a seam ripper and some scissors to make a nice hole here. I'm actually going to use my Cam Snaps press that has a hole punch die. And again, I'm just making sure I don't go through this lining. I'm folding the lining out of the way, which can be a little tricky. And then I'm just going to put a hole in the exterior just like this. So there we go. And that just leaves me with a perfect hole to work with. And do the same with the other hole. So now I have the holes for my strap keeper ready to go. You're going to need the washer for your strap keeper, 2 screws, and the actual strap keeper. If you have it available, you can grab another piece of your Decovil Heavy and use that washer to mark holes and punch out those holes. We'll add this in between the exterior and the lining behind the strap keeper. This just adds a little bit of thickness. You'll notice sometimes that these screws don't want to go in all the way, and you don't want this to be too loose. So adding a little bit more thickness helps keep that strap keeper from moving around and potentially coming unscrewed. So what we can do is take our washer, line it up with that interfacing, put 1 screw inside, push it in between the exterior and the lining, and push it so that the screw comes up just like that. Grab your strap keeper. You could also add a little bit of glue inside of your strap keeper. This Beacon 301 works really, really well. You could add a drop of glue inside of there before you screw it on, just to make sure it really doesn't come undone. I try to screw it on a little bit with the strap keeper first, and then take your screwdriver inside and screw this into place. You don't have to screw it super tight because we will still have to move this around. All right, second screw. This is always the hardest one. Take that second screw, make sure that the washer is lined up with both of the holes. And we want to poke that screw to the front side, just like this. Line up your strap keeper so that it's over that screw. and then just screw it into place. And if you lined it up properly, it should screw into place just fine. And now we can give it a firmer twist just to make sure it's nice and sturdy in there. So now you can see whenever we close our flap and our strap, it's nice and secure. And that's how I attach the strap keeper. All right, so now we can top stitch closed this opening that we left for installing that strap keeper. So if you want, you can go ahead and clip this. We want to make sure that the lining edge and the exterior edge are at the same spot. Don't really want one to be sticking further out than the other. Now we're just going to top stitch along this clipped edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so your wallet should look just like this. We are so close to being done. We just have to attach the gussets and the pocket, and both of those steps are very, very easy. So you can take your wallet and put this to the side. So now grab your 4 gusset panels. None of these have interfacing on them, which makes it very, very helpful when sewing this together to have nice, thin seams. However, if I were to make this again with interfacing, I would probably use Pellon 808 Craft Fuse because these are going to stay folded, and I think that that crispness would really add a nice firmness to the structure of the sides of the bag. But interfacing is definitely not necessary here. My finished wallet turned out beautifully without the interfacing. So now what we want to do is grab each of the gusset panels, and on the smaller bottom edge, you want to fold them up wrong sides together at 3/8 inch seam allowance. If it helps, you can definitely once again mark 3/4 of an inch from that bottom edge, and then fold up that bottom raw edge wrong sides together to meet that marked line and press along that edge. You'll also notice that on our pieces, we have this little notch right here where it goes down and then it goes back out. That notch is actually exactly 3/8 of an inch where you're supposed to be folding. So when you fold this up, it should line up perfectly with the edges on the top part of the gusset. Go ahead and do this for all 4 gusset panels. So now with these gussets folded on the bottom, take your gusset and fold it side to side, right sides together. So the bottom fold should still be in place along the bottom. The top is a raw edge, and those slanted side seams line up perfectly. Go ahead and clip along that edge. And do this for all 4 gusset pieces. So once you have all 4 of your gussets clipped, we're going to sew along these clipped edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So now take your little gusset tube and move this around so that your seam is directly down the center of the top and the bottom, just like this. And what we're going to do is press this seam allowance open. Go ahead and do this for each of your gussets. Okay, once you have all of these pressed, we're going to mark a line from the bottom folded edge going up. She gives you this measurement in the pattern. This is just going to ensure that each gusset is the exact same size. So what I like to do is line up my ruler with the desired marking on the bottom edge, and then I line up one of my grid marks going straight along that folded seam, and then I just use a marker to mark a line just like that. Do this for all 4 gusset pieces. So now take these to your sewing machine and just sew along that marked line on each gusset. All right, once you have those stitched down, you can go ahead and trim the corners so that we have a nice smooth finish. And then I just go ahead and trim down the seam allowance too, so it's about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And do this for all 4 of your gussets. Just trim down those corners. Make sure you don't accidentally cut your stitching. All right, once we have them trimmed down, we can just fold them right side out. Just be gentle here. These are really small. I'm going to use my turning tool to help poke out those corners. Just be gentle. Make sure you don't rip them on accident. Make sure that bottom edge stays folded, so if it comes undone, just tuck it back in. Once you have one turned out, making sure that that seam is still centered, you can go ahead and press it to hold it in place. Now do this for all 4 gussets. So this should be what you're left with, these nice 4 flat gusset panels. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew close this bottom edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. When sewing, make sure you sew with the seam side up. Since this can go up just a tiny bit, you want to make sure that it's caught. Sometimes an 1/8 of an inch might not quite catch all of it. So just make sure you're catching both of the edges on the bottom of these gussets. Okay, before you go on, make sure you clip all of your little threads. We are just about done, so you want to make sure this is all cleaned up before you get to the end. So now we're going to fold these so that the seam is on the outside and the right sides are together. So when you fold it in half, like hot dog style, the seam is running right along that fold and it's seen on that fold. Go ahead and press this to keep it in place just like that. And then I'm also going to add a couple clips just so I don't forget which way this is supposed to go. Do this with all 4 of your gussets, again making sure the seam is on the outside of the fold. And we're just folding right along that seam. And the edges should match up really well. I love Diane. She calls these your gusset babies. They are like little babies. They're so cute. Now it's time to attach these to the wallet. So open up your wallet so that it's lining side up. Take one gusset and we're going to clip it to the side with the pockets, with the fold going into the center of the wallet and the wider section of the gusset going towards the top of the wallet. So it should look just like this. Now grab another gusset and lay this one in the opposite direction. So this time the wider edge of the gusset is going to go towards the bottom of your wallet. And again, the fold is pointing into the center of the wallet. Now this one should be about 3/8 of an inch from the other gusset. And it should come right up to the top stitching on your wallet. So we're going to clip it in place first and then we can adjust. So fold these in, fold the wallet together. And so when I fold this together, I notice one gusset is a little bit higher. My gusset on the card slots is a little too high. So all you have to do is just arrange it so it's the way you want. So I'm going to pull this bottom gusset up here just to meet that top stitching. And then I'm going to pull this other gusset down to be right on that seam. You're just going to finagle this until they line up the way you want them to. So again, fold it up. All right, and now when this is closed, I can see my gussets can line up just fine. The fold will be fine. The flap's not going to fold down on the gussets. All right, so this will work. So now we're going to sew these gussets down along the side of our wallet at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You should notice that your stitching should start right by the flap top stitching, go all the way down, and should end right by the bottom top stitching. I'll be using a stiletto to help hold this in place while I'm sewing. So now we have one set of gussets attached to the side. We're going to repeat this process for the other side. So once again, for the card slot section, we're going to make sure that the fold is pointing into the center of the wallet. The larger edge of the gusset is pointing up towards the top flap. Now I'm just going to line this up the same way I did on the other side. On the other side, I ended up moving my gusset so that it's at the same spot as the bottom edge of my card slots. So I'm going to do that on this side as well. And this all depends on how you fold your wallet. So that could depend on the type of material you're using, on the type of interfacing you're using. This might not be the same for you. Your gusset might lay a little bit higher on your card slot or a little bit lower. This is just for me how it works. Again, we're going to take the bottom gusset and lay it down so that the wider side is going down towards the bottom of the wallet. And the fold is pointing into the center of the wallet. And I'm just going to line it up with the top stitching on the bottom so that my stitching will stop there. And then just like before, we're going to pull it up together and check. Make sure you fold down that top flap. So now once again, we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew along this edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You may have noticed on this side, I backstitch really well at the beginning and the end of every single gusset, just to make sure any tension on them doesn't cause the seam to rip. This should be where you're at. Now it's time to grab the pocket. You thought we forgot about this, didn't you? Nope, nope, nope. This goes in at the very end. This is the last step. So first what we're going to do is close up these gussets and then attach the coin purse pocket. Grab two sides of your gussets and pull them out and away from the wallet and line up those outer edges and pin or clip together. Now we want to sew along this clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have these sewn together, grab your pocket, and I like to put the zipper on the left side. And what you're going to do is insert your pocket into the middle of your wallet, and we're going to tuck the edge, the seam, right up against the seam on our two gussets. So we're just snugging it in there. The top edge of your zipper should be right up against the top edge of the gusset. It shouldn't be lower or higher than it. Use your fingers to get in there and really make sure it's pushed up against the seam between the two gussets. And then we can go ahead and clip this together, just like that. All right, once you have that pocket clipped in place, nice and tucked in that seam, now we're going to go and sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So this should catch both of the gussets and that zipper pocket panel on the inside. Okay, once you have this side done, we're just going to repeat the process on the other side. So grab your other two gussets and pull them out away from the wallet and line up their outer edges and clip those together. Now let's go sew along this edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So once you have that edge sewn together, we're going to take that pocket panel and we're just going to move it over. And once again, line it up with the top of that seam and keep the edge of it right tucked in to that seam we just sewed. You can peek on the bottom to make sure it's all the way up. There we go. So now we're going to sew along this edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So once you have this attached, you can just push the zip pocket into the center of the wallet, push down your gussets, try to get them back on those folds that you pressed earlier. This is where if you use something like craft fuse or a nice interfacing, it would really help those gussets remember to go back to those creases. And then you can fold down your wallet, tug it in, and there you go. All right, are you ready to see the pinkest wallet ever? Bam, pink. These fabrics were chosen for a very special person who is going to love this wallet. You can see we have this beautiful strap that goes all the way down into that just gorgeous strap keeper. I'm really glad I ordered these because I feel like the design is very professional, and that piece right there makes it custom made, not handmade. You know what I mean? I love that piece. It just, I don't know. I'm interested in making this wallet without that, but I've got to be honest, I think I'm always going to prefer using these. So if you can, order some of these off of Emmeline. She has like every single color available. They're beautiful. Open this up. Bam. Right? This lining fabric looks nice. So we have a card slots on top, and we have just these nice big pockets for billfolds on both sides, and we have a nice change coin purse in the middle. I think a lot of you guys are going to love this wallet. I really do. I know that a lot of you guys have been looking for wallet patterns, and we've had a couple already that have been super fun and super awesome to make. However, this one, I would say if you had to have a first wallet pattern, this should be your first wallet, because like I said, you don't have a lot of thick seams. Yeah, there's a lot of steps, but you're going to find that with any wallet pattern. You have thinner seams. It comes together really well. It's probably one of the most functional wallets because we can very easily insert our bills In the pattern, you probably noticed that she does incorporate some steps to make this a little crossbody pouch. I didn't have the hardware for that, so I did not include that in the tutorial today, but if you make one of those, I would love to see it. If you make one of these wallets, make sure you tag Spencer Ogg on Instagram and Facebook. Also give me a tag. I really want to see what you guys are doing with this. I am very interested in making an all vinyl version of this. And like I said, adding some of that interfacing to those gussets right there to make them a little bit more crisp. I think it would poof it out quite a bit more. I think it'll be a chunkier wallet, but just with some quilt cotton and some interfacing, I mean, these look pretty professional. They feel really nice. I haven't had any problems with the edges rolling up or anything like that. That was my biggest concern, was that these corner edges eventually would start rolling up. I haven't seen that. This is just a really, really great pattern, a really fun wallet to make. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial today. If you have any questions or anything, make sure you leave them down in the comment section down below. I hope you have a great rest of the week. Get out there and make something. Bye!